The Dahlia banner has been out for about 2 weeks now, and before her banner ends, I think it's a good time, one last time, to ask ourselves, should I pull for the Dahlia? I've tested her extensively in Memory of Chaos, Pure Fiction, and Apocalyptic Shadow, and yes, to some extent, Anomaly Arbitration as well. Hey everyone, welcome back. Today, we're doing a proper review of the Dahlia, her strengths, her weaknesses, and most importantly, whether she's actually worth your pulls or not. I'll keep this as simple as possible, so please bear with me. So, what are we waiting for? Let's jump right into it. So Dahlia is a Fire Nihility character. Her main role, of course, is as a break and super break support. She enables a new playstyle that allows super break teams to deal super break damage even when enemies are not yet in a break state, which is honestly pretty strong. Why is this good, you might ask? Well, in Honkai Star Rail, we've seen massive HP inflation and toughness bar inflation over time. By default, super break teams only deal big damage during a very small window, when the enemy is actually in a break state. The current level of HP and toughness bar inflation makes it much harder for super break teams to deal high damage and clear content quickly compared to when they were first released. Super break teams have to deal with both HP inflation and toughness bar inflation, compared to normal teams like hypercarry crit teams, which mostly only need to worry about HP inflation. With Dahlia, this problem is somewhat fixed, though not completely. Alright, no more yapping. Let's get right into Dahlia's kit and what makes her so good for super break teams. Let's start with Dahlia's most important kit, her skill, as this is the bread and butter of her entire kit. When Dahlia uses her skill, she deploys a zone that lasts for 3 turns, dealing damage and granting all allies 2 additional benefits. First, it increases all allies' weakness break efficiency by 50%. Second, and most importantly, it converts toughness reduction dealt to enemies who are not in a weakness broken state into super break damage. You might ask, how much damage does this actually deal? Well, you can look directly at the super break formula. I'll put it up on screen here as an example. If you don't fully understand the connection between the formula and Dahlia Skill, the key takeaway is this. The more toughness you reduce, or are supposed to reduce, because in some cases, like the Firefly boss, the enemy's toughness bar cannot be reduced, the higher your super break damage will be. This directly solves the core issue of super break damage only being meaningful during the break state window. With Dahlia, team building can now focus more on damage boosting supports, such as weakness break efficiency, damage percent increases, rest pen, and so on. This skill alone makes building a super break team significantly easier. Let's not forget to talk about her talent, another important part of Dahlia's kit. You thought all that super break damage you deal before the enemy is broken is all Dahlia has to offer? Think again. Dahlia's talent grants her and one other ally, either the character who initiates combat or the teammate with the highest break effect, a dance partner status. This dance partner status provides 2 main benefits. First, it launches a follow-up attack every time Dahlia's DPS dance partner attacks. This part of her talent directly synergizes with her A4 major trace, which recovers 1 skill point for every 2 follow-up attacks Dahlia performs. This is huge, especially if you're running E0 Firefly, where skill point management can be pretty tight. Second, Dahlia's talent allows her to deal additional super break damage when the enemy is already in a weakness broken state. The bonus isn't massive, only 60% at max level, but hey, it's still extra damage. To sum it up, Dahlia's talent buffs super break DPS, especially Firefly, both inside and outside of the weakness broken state. I'd say this is a solid win for super break users. Next, let's talk about Dahlia's ultimate. You might be wondering, hey Hoshi, not every character has a weakness implant, right? Even Rappa doesn't have one. Sorry, Rappa. If that's the case, how does Dahlia even synergize with them? Well, don't worry. Dahlia's ultimate ties up all the loose ends. Her ultimate does 2 things. First, it obviously deals fire damage. No explanation needed there. But I want you to pay close attention to the second part of her ultimate effect, which applies the wilt status to enemies. Enemies affected by wilt have their defense reduced by 18%, and on top of that, Dahlia implants the weakness type of her dance partner onto the enemy. Pretty good, right? This means even Rappa can fully benefit from Dahlia, because her ultimate allows Dahlia to implant her dance partner's weakness type onto enemies. So if you're worried that your super break DPS doesn't have a built-in weakness implant, don't be. Dahlia already has it covered with her ultimate. Dahlia might work well with most super break DPS characters, but for me, both personally and objectively, she works best with Firefly. You know, one of Firefly's biggest weaknesses, aside from the super break mechanic itself, is how difficult it is to reach her next ultimate after her first ultimate ends. Since Firefly only gains 60% energy every time she uses her skill, she needs to use her skill at least twice to get her ultimate back. This is very inefficient, and it becomes even more problematic in sustainless teams, where the damage loss really hurts. Fortunately, Dahlia fixes this problem with her A6 trace. And man, Dahlia's A6 trace does a lot. I count at least 2 major effects. The first effect: whenever an ally with dance partner status implants a weakness onto an enemy, they gain 30% speed for 2 turns. This is already huge for Firefly because she naturally implants weakness every time she attacks. An additional 30% speed on top of that? That's insane. This easily pushes Firefly's speed past 200 during her ultimate. For those who don't know, in Honkai Star Rail, speed is closely tied to how many actions a character gets per cycle. If you look at speed breakpoint charts, 200 speed means Firefly can take 3 turns in the first cycle. Of course, this is more relevant for min-maxing and zero cycling in MOC, so take it with a grain of salt. The second effect of Dahlia's A6 trace is even more Firefly coded. If a fire ally implants a weakness, they deal an additional 20 flat fire toughness reduction. Yes, flat, not percentage based, which is crazy. On top of that, every time this happens, the fire ally regenerates 10% of their max energy, capped at 50%. You know it, I know it, everyone knows which fire character this trace is designed for. Yes, it's Firefly. In short, Dahlia's A6 trace directly buffs Firefly and makes her entire rotation much smoother. There's also one more trace worth mentioning: Dahlia's A2 trace. Her A2 trace increases other characters' break effect by 24% of Dahlia's break effect, plus an additional 50% for 1 turn whenever combat starts. This effect refreshes every time Dahlia receives a shield or healing. I'm honestly not sure how impactful this trace is, since Super Break teams are usually played sustainless, especially in harder content. But hey, Phanon has a similar type of trace, so I'd say it's still a nice bonus to Dahlia's already strong kit. For build priority, I recommend leveling Talent first, followed by Ultimate, and lastly Skill, or Basic Attack if you really want to. There's not much to say here. You mainly want to prioritize her Talent, since her skill doesn't actually scale much with levels. For Relic stats, I personally prefer HP % body, speed boots, HP % planar sphere, energy regeneration rope or break effect rope. You can use either rope depending on which has better substats. For Relic sets, the choice is pretty straightforward: 4-piece Iron Cavalry for the main Relic set. For planar ornaments, you have several options. I personally like 2-piece Lushaka since it provides extra ATK for Firefly, while also giving Dahlia more energy regeneration, which helps smooth out her rotations. Alternatively, you can always go with 2-piece Forge, which is also a solid and consistent option. One very important thing to remember with Super Break teams is that Dahlia needs to be extremely fast. 160 plus speed is basically mandatory. After that, stack as much break effect as possible. I prefer running HP focused main stats over attack because of the extra survivability they provide. Since Super Break teams are usually played sustainless, that extra HP really helps Dahlia stay alive. For Lightcones, there isn't much to talk about. Since I'm a pretty F2P player, I'm using the Resolution Lightcone because I didn't pull for Dahlia's signature Lightcone. You can also use the Herta Shop Lightcone, which you can get completely for free. Honestly, Lightcones aren't a major issue for Dahlia. They're not mandatory for her, and in my opinion, they aren't mandatory for you either. You can get by perfectly fine using F2P Lightcones. If you really want to min-max Dahlia, then sure, go ahead and pull for her signature Lightcone. If you're going all in, you might as well go all the way. But personally, I won't be pulling for her signature Lightcone. For me, without E1 Fugue and without S5 DDD, I prefer running Firefly /Fugue /Dahlia /Ruan Mei. This team maximizes weakness break efficiency buffs, which helps compensate for not having E1 Fugue. You can interchange Ruan Mei or Fugue with Harmony MC, but honestly, the only scenario where I'd recommend doing this is when your Harmony MC has S5 DDD. Anything less than that, and in my opinion, it's not worth it. You can also run a full fire team composition with Firefly /Dahlia /Fugue /Lingsha. I'm not a huge fan of this team because of its lower damage output, but if you prefer a safer playstyle, it's a perfectly valid option. Personally, I prefer playing sustainless, unless the content becomes too unbearable, of course. Next, let's talk about Eidolons. I'll focus only on the recommended stopping points if you really, really want to min-max Dahlia by pulling her Eidolons. The most obvious first stopping point is Dahlia E1. E1 is extremely strong. It grants the additional super break damage multiplier, the original 60% bonus, to all allies, and also boosts it by another 40%. In total, this results in a 100% super break damage instance. And that's not all. After the dance partner attacks, the target also takes additional toughness reduction equal to 25% of the enemy's maximum toughness. Yes, 25% of the entire toughness bar. That's insane. Because of this, if you want to invest further into Dahlia, E1 is the best value point. Beyond E1, the next Eidolon with truly massive value is Dahlia E6. At E6, every time Dahlia triggers a follow-up attack, she advances all allies' next actions by 20%. This is absurdly strong, especially since Dahlia can trigger 2, 3, or even 4 follow-up attacks per MOC cycle. So if you want to go all the way, E6 is the endgame goal. That said, E1 alone is already a huge upgrade. However, I do want to emphasize this. Dahlia is already very strong at E0. She is fully usable and performs extremely well without any Eidolons. You don't need to pull for her Eidolons unless you're aiming for hardcore min-maxing or zero cycle clears. And if that's your goal, then hey, go for it. So, E1 versus Signature Lightcone. Which one should you go for first? Looking at it objectively, Dahlia's Signature Lightcone mainly provides additional break effect, along with increased overall break damage for both Dahlia and her dance partner. E1, on the other hand, provides additional damage for all allies and, on top of that, adds extra toughness bar reduction, making it significantly easier to break enemies. Because of this, it's honestly a no-brainer. E1 is the better choice over S1. And there you go. That's the recommendation. Now for the biggest question in the galaxy. Should you pull for Dahlia? Personally, I feel that if you have at least E2 Firefly, then yes, you can go ahead and pull for Dahlia. Even though Dahlia's kit is very strong for break teams, she doesn't elevate Firefly, or super break teams in general, to that next level unless you've already invested very heavily into the super break archetype. And yes, even with E2 Firefly, you still need either E1 Fugue or S5 DDD to consistently zero cycle Mach. That's both insane and kind of hilarious, and it just proves how extreme the current HP inflation has become. So my recommendation is this: don't pull for Dahlia unless you have at least E2 Firefly. At that point, the value just isn't there. You're better off waiting for a 4.0 or later DPS and investing heavily into them instead. Honestly, Dahlia feels a lot like Fugue back in version 2.7. Does anyone even remember her before Dahlia came out? Yeah, exactly. So, invest your resources where you'll get the most return. That said, if your motto is waifu for life, then go for it. At the end of the day, it's your preference, and that's totally fair. So that's all for today's video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it and found it interesting. I'm improving with every video. Feel free to share your feedback in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And as always, I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye!